sitting here editing videos so that I can upload them, and I realized that I decided to split one day's activities into two videos for I guess segregation of subjects. I was doing the HVAC in the morning, and after that I moved on to the steering column, and I wanted to make the steering column its own video, so there's no like intro. It just kind of jumps right into a time lapse. The other thing is the battery dies on the camera in the middle of the time lapse. I had it plugged into a charger, but I guess it was a low power charger and it wasn't charging, or maybe a GoPro can't charge and record at the same time. I've not bothered to actually troubleshoot that yet. So, but we're gonna run out of time lapse as we get into this one. But there was a lot of content around the steering wheel. It wound up being a difficult project simply because of damaged parts that I had. A bad clock spring or roll connector, and then another one that I got out of the junkyard that was bad too. It led me to the first one before I realized it was bad. Led me to do a lot of troubleshooting that was probably unnecessary, but I did wind up with some unique things with the car that didn't match the wiring diagram. So there's a lot of content here. I decided to try and put it in its own video. I got the steering column shortened. That was fairly trivial. I marked this column here. It looks like the marks are already worn off, but I marked the shaft here. I read that you could collapse it 1 inch, so I marked it at 1/2, 1, and 1.5. And I simply took it and set it down on a piece of wood and hammered the shaft down 1 inch. But I wanted more than 1 inch. I wanted 3 inches. So the next step is to take this shaft and drive it into this shaft. So I marked it in 1/2 inch increments from 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. Collapse it 2 inches by drilling a nice big hole in the bottom of this 2x4. Sliding it over the, I'd have to hammer it down more, but I slid it over so that it would push on that, and hammered this in. So I'm collapsed 3 inches, 1 inch on the shaft and 2 inches on the column. I'm waiting for somebody to come help me install it, because it kind of requires you to have 3 hands and be on both sides of the firewall. So while I'm waiting on that, I started working on the cruise control switch, which I have somewhere handy. Oh, there it is. 5-pin on the other side of the roll connector. It mounts so that it rotates with the steering wheel. And according to the wiring diagrams, it should all go through connector ST1 and ST2, which is this connector here. And it plugs nicely into it, and all the buttons from it come back nicely to here. The problem is the wires from here don't all come back to one place. I've actually cracked open my roll connector so I can get this little ribbon cable out. 3 of the wires come back to here, and 2 of the wires are the other 3 wires in this ribbon connector come over to this pin. So 3 come out of ST1 and 3 come out of, I don't even know what this is. And so 3 of them land right here. These 2 don't appear to go anywhere. I don't know what they do. Those 4 are airbags, and they go into there. I eliminated the airbag, so I'm thoroughly confused at this point. My current plan is to maybe try and solder 3 more wires on here. Cut 3 wires out of here. Find a plug that'll fit into there, and that'll give me all 6 wires. But I don't know. So it's clear that either, all I can think is that this car did not come with cruise control, because that's the wiring manual for this car. I didn't know any car in 2006 didn't come with cruise control, especially one that was nice enough to have a turbo, so I'm thoroughly confused. Time to go hit the internet. Yeah, they've really screwed myself now. I opened up the roll connector so I could figure out what was going on. Not exactly what I was expecting to see inside. Basically, there's two ribbon cables that spiral around, and then I guess some plastic to keep them from contacting each other and keep them slippery and in shape maybe. So this ribbon cable that exited on this side, the one that I said that the red and black wire didn't seem to go anywhere, the end had broken off it, I think long before my time, which means that car's airbag would have never worked. That's not good. But I've still got it outside. I could solder it back on if I needed to. The real question is what do I need to do? Because this roll pin clearly does not match my wiring diagram or roll connector. You can see exactly like I thought was happening. 3 wires went to one connector, and 3 wires went to the middle, 3 wires went to the right, and then 4 went to the airbag one. So, and I still don't know where the red and black wire was supposed to go. It doesn't look like they came in here at all. So, my options are to repair this and solder 3 wires right here for the other 3 wires I need that are missing, because the whole problem was I didn't have enough wires going into my roll connector at all. Get this back together and then jumper the 3 wires from here over to here. I could basically just tap the 3 that are coming back here on my cruise control switch over, if I could find a plug that plugs into here, and then those would all come out right here on this connector, and I could use it. The other option is to try and find a roll connector that's obviously works, has cruise control in it. So while I've got it apart, I'm gonna go ahead and solder 3 more wires on here and try and put it back together. And if that doesn't work, I'll start looking to buy a new one. Well, I have at the very least figured out what is going on with the cruise control. Still not sure I'm going to fix it. Let's see. Let's go here. Apparently my car, which is an 06, had a very early model 06 column, which used this type of cruise control switch, which is different from this one in that it doesn't have the button on the end to turn it on and off. It just has the resume, set, and cancel. And then it would have a separate button for turning it on and off, like that one in the dash. And so that's why when I looked at my clock spring, it was missing those 3 wires. Because those 3 were the ones that would have carried that set button. Actually, it only needs 2 of them to carry that set button back and forth. So I only, you need 5 to carry the signal instead of 3. You need an extra 2 for the on and off button. And so that's why this cruise control switch, which model number for an 06, wasn't going to work with my clock spring the way it was. So I can either put my clock spring back exactly the way it was and wire up a separate button to toggle the cruise on and off like that, or I can modify my clock spring so that these signals come through, which is what I think I'm going to at least attempt to do. So I'm fixing to break out the soldering kit and start working on the clock spring, see if I can make some progress. For the spacer for the steering column is printing. It's going to be 2 inches thick, so it takes 17 hours to print. It'll be going all night. And I got the pins on the roll connector fixed. I'm supposed to use one of these little sandwich connectors. So I used not a pocket knife, but a razor. There's a razor around here somewhere. And I slowly scraped away the coating until I had copper. And I tried to use a little smush connector, but it could never get the red one, the inside one, to connect, get continuity from the pins all the way out the wire. So I broke down and soldered it. It's a little ugly. Not great at soldering small things, but there's no crossover. It works, so as long as it doesn't come undone when I untape it. Then I just got to figure out how to wind this connector back up. Oh Lord, so good luck on that. If I can't get it wound back up, a new one's 75 bucks, so I certainly rather not spend 75 bucks on something I already have. Are we rolling?
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys, I'm back out in the garage on Saturday. Friday was most unproductive. I spent all day doing research and fighting my roll connector and trying to print a spacer for the steering column. So yesterday I was messing with the roll connector. I finally was unable to salvage it. I read a lot of posts on the internet that said you can't re-roll one once it's been uncoiled. I tried anyway and I failed spectacularly, so I went to the junkyard this morning and pulled one out of the pick and pull, so I have one of those. But right now I'm focusing on the spacer. I think I showed you guys a video yesterday where I was printing the spacer. I did stop the print because, as you can see, it was starting to curl real bad. So this was the bottom where it was printing, and it was curling and lifting, and so it's going to be all crooked. So I just stopped the print, but it gave me enough to mock up with. So the spacers put it at the height I want it to be at, and so I was just got the steering wheel on here checking to see if I like it. I like the height. It's where it needs to be. And I still have some up and down adjustments, so that's at the bottom. I can still put it up some. Well, maybe. It's binding on something. But I'll figure out what it's binding on. I should be able to put it up a little bit to help with getting in and out. But it's still way too close to my body. I mean, I've got some pretty long arms. This is good for a track day, but this wouldn't be great for cruising down the street. So I think I want to...
It won't be really good if you want to drive it for hours and hours and hours.
No, it would not be very good for a GT Cruiser. So I think I'm going to pull the column back out, compact it at least another inch, maybe 2 inches. I think 2 inches would be real nice. My spacer here certainly has 2 inches to go before I have to resize my spacer. So I think I'm going to compact it another 2 inches. That'll move it back to there. That feels a lot better. So that's what I'm fixing to do next. I'm going to pull the column out, press it another 2 inches. I installed a heated bed on the 3D printer this morning, so I should be able to 3D print that without it curling. And so I'll print that one day this week. Well, 2 days. It's about a 40-hour print to print a bracket that big at that thickness, which I feel like or that density, and I feel like I need that density for the strength. So I'm gonna compact the column, and then once I've done that, I'll probably work on getting the roll connector back in here. I've also got to figure out how to get the cruise control switch mounted. I think I'm gonna 3D print a part for that. There's a kind of a cheap plastic cover that goes right here and covers this up. It's not quite big enough to hold the cruise control switch, so I think I'll just 3D print one that's about 1/4 of an inch bigger in diameter. That's all it needs, about 1/4 inch diameter, and then I'll be able to 3D print in the actual place to mount it, screw it to. So I'll be able to 3D print a bracket inside of it when I design it. So yeah, I think that's what I'm gonna do today. Get the column compressed, and then maybe clean up some wiring. Yeah, clean up some wiring. All right, that's a wrap. That didn't go the way I intended. I was trying to compress this piece of the column into this piece of the column, and I guess I bottomed out on the hole in my block of wood, and I wound up driving the shaft all the way down in. I don't know if it's even possible to get that out. Good news is I've got a spare if it comes to it, but try and fix this one first. Okay, I did manage to get the shaft back out of the steering column. It actually slides in and out freely now, which made it really easy to get connected under here. But it still rotates just fine. So it's secured on this end and it's secured on the other end, so I think it's okay, but definitely going to take a couple of slow laps around the block, make sure that I don't have any issues with my steering before I start pushing it hard. The other thing I did was I figured out why it was binding and got the up and down adjustment working and decided that I didn't need a 2-inch spacer. 1 inch is sufficient, so I'm gonna print me a 1 inch that's not warped most likely, or I may just use this one. You can't see it once I put all the covers on. So I think I'm gonna work on the fan next. I want to get the shrouded fan installed. I picked up a connector when I went to the junkyard this morning to get the clock spring for the steering wheel. While I was there, I found a connector so that I can get that fan wired up. The radiator fan installed. I just use zip ties through the radiator. It's a little old school, but it works just fine. It's not going anywhere. There was really no good place to mount it. The very small lip here I could have used is really all I had. So it's in there sturdy, not going anywhere. That's the connector I picked up at the junkyard off of a random Ford. And now it's all loomed and tidied up, so I can put some mounts in the frame and secure all of that. Time to figure out what I'm working on next. I think I'm gonna work on the roll connector next. I think that's the next thing. Get the roll connector figured out, and then figure out how to 3D print my cover that's gonna hold my cruise lever. Who would have thought cruise control would be the most complicated task I took up on this car? This is, I think this is worse than the shifter linkage. So this is a roll connector I picked up out of the junkyard. I have spent the last little bit of time pinning it out, and I'm pretty sure it's got some bad connectors in it. There are 3 connectors, left, middle, and right. None of the left ones work. None of this airbag wires work. So this dude's airbag wouldn't have worked. If he was obviously in a wreck. His car was in a junkyard, but it was thankfully not front end. The airbag didn't look like it even tried to go off. Wouldn't have gone off anyway because none of those wires are connected through there. In the middle connector, pins 3, 4, and 5 work. There is no pin 6. I can delete that out. But pins 1 and 2 don't. And then on the right pin, numbers 2 and 3 work, but number 1 doesn't. So I know that inside of here there are 2 ribbon cables. Each one does 6 for a total of 12. Here we have 4 and 5 is 9 and 3 is 12. So all 12 of these pins should be coming out here. And I have 5 working ones, which is a little odd. You would think if 1 ribbon cable was bad, I would have 6 working ones, which is kind of what I suspect I have, except for maybe one of them's just not seated well. None of the wires on this side light up, so I'm pretty sure this ribbon cable's bad. And then all of them but one on this side work. The brown one doesn't work. And I know when I was messing with those ribbon cables yesterday, it was really tough to get a connection between this wire here and the ribbon cable. It used to kind of flip down, but then these aren't really ribbon cables that are made for a flip down. It's not too sure why it's built the way it is. So I've got 5 wires, which I think is exactly how many wires I need. The horn wire comes in to feed the cruise, and then it also feeds the horn, which is exactly what this looks like. 5 wires for the cruise and 1 for the horn. So I think this one would work. I also picked up the one that goes with this roll connector out of the wrecked vehicle. It was a 07 Forester. It looks exactly the same, but it's only got 3 wires instead of 5. And so it does its control in a different manner, and my ECU would never understand it. I wish my ECU would understand this, because I'd only need 3 wires and I'd have 5. So, this one has 5 wires in 1 connector. I have 5 working wires among 2 connectors, but thankfully, if I want it, I've got the connector that goes right there. So I've got to decide if I want to try and make this work or just order a new one. And I'm thinking after I get the entire car together, I don't want to have to be taking the steering wheel back apart to change a roll connector. So I think I'm just going to order a brand new one, and maybe I can get my money back on this. I don't know. I mean, they scribe it for warranty reasons, but I don't know if they offer money back or if they just would make me wait until they had another one available, because this was the only one they had in the scrapyard. So, yeah. Guess I'm gonna order another one. Yay. Ready to start the mock up on the bracket for the cruise control switch. I had originally intended to completely remake this whole thing. 3D print a new black piece here that was, like I said earlier, about 1/4 of an inch bigger, because I was trying to fit this entire box right here underneath it, because it does look a little funny sticking out like that. But then when I actually put the whole steering wheel together to try and get orientation, I realized there's just absolutely no way you can see that right there unless you stick your head behind the steering wheel. And a big plastic piece, I think, would probably draw attention from the top. So I'm just going to put it together like this. I've got it oriented exactly like it needs to go. So what I'm going to do is this black plastic piece here bolts in. It's a flimsy piece of plastic. I'm going to 3D print a new one of those that only has the 2 holes I need, which is that one and that one. I'll close up those 2 and those 2. I will print it twice as thick because there's enough room to do that right there to get it stiffer. And then I will also put 2 holes for the cruise control switch, and it's kind of hard to see back there, but there's 2 tabs that stick off the back here with holes, and so it'll bolt to that. I will probably also go ahead and make it round just for more strength, and we'll see how that works as a 3D printed part. If that's not stiff enough, then I can just take the file that I used to 3D print and upload it to one of these places that'll water cut a piece and mail it to you, and I get a metal one made. That'll definitely be stiff enough to hold that bracket, or that cruise control lever. All right, I think this is the final bracket for the cruise control mount. So as you can see, I made it pretty thick. It's 4 mil thick. It's really stiff, way stiffer than the little flimsy piece that came with the steering wheel. Of course, it wasn't really made to do anything but turn the clock spring before. Now it's got to turn the clock spring and hold the cruise control switch. So, this cruise control switch sits down like that. And then those studs are to account for the fact that those are not flush, and I'm probably gonna have to cut that little nub off to make it fit right. I think, take it out and look at it, I think it's probably gonna bump. I don't think it quite clears the hole. Kind of clears the hole. We might have to cut it off. So, I'll put that back down in there. Like that. Get it lined up and pushed one-handed. It's pretty tight. There we go. Missed a little bit. Let's straighten it up. There we go. So, that hole and that hole catch the clock spring, and then those two holes right there perfectly catch. Get it lined up right. There we go. Perfectly catch the cruise control lever. So that should work. We just need to put some small bolts through there. Quarter 20 is a little too big, so it'll be smaller than a quarter 20, maybe a number 10. Stick it through there and put it on the car. It'll be nice and neat. Pretty happy with the way that came out, and it was way better than printing a whole new surround. So that's yep, real happy with that. I'm finally getting the hang of this 3D printing stuff after years of doing it. Alright, gonna try and wrap up the video on the steering wheel. I still have to replace the roll connector with a new one, but everything else is done, and so that'll be a trivial matter. The cruise control switch is now nicely mounted in here, and as you can see, it's functioning properly. From a mechanical standpoint, obviously the wires don't work. The steering wheel's on. There's the lowering bracket that I 3D printed. So, man, this 3D printing stuff is really sweet. I mean, you can't use it in the engine bay, but here in the passenger compartment, you can print almost any kind of bracket or adapter you would need. So next we'll be printing brackets for the dash. But steering wheel's in. It's lowered. It's about, oh man, it's probably 3.5, 4 inches back. I really pushed it back, and so I'm really happy with that. I can now get my arms in a real comfortable position, being a little over 6 foot tall. This is I've got the 1 inch drop bracket here, which drops it more than an inch because it changes the angle. So this is all the way up, and then you can let's see there. I can actually drop it down all the way to there, which puts it only, I don't know, about 8 inches above the seat. Really gets it in your lap. So you know, that would be nice, kind of maybe if you're on a, you know, a 4 or 5 hour drive and you wanted to be able to just kind of hang your arms on the wheels. I think for any kind of spirited driving, probably want it up here. That's about, I don't know, my arms at not quite a 90, so that's about a good, that's a real good driving position for me. Though if you get your arms too high when you're doing track driving, your arms get really tired. So yeah, so that's the steering wheel. I mean, I'll put the top cover on and the bottom cover on, but I won't do that until I get the roll connector changed out and figure out the pinouts on whatever roll connector I wind up with. So it took me 2.5 days, but I finally got everything done I wanted to on the steering wheel. So a more productive weekend than I'd anticipated.